internet connection is working okay because it is giving us all kinds of hits for the second episode in a row. So apologies for that. Tubby, are you with me?
I'm with you.
Okay,
I
good.
gotcha.
Your screen has not moved on my side, but hopefully for the viewers it is. So that's good to hear. And my voice is a little under the weather right now. I don't know. I've got a head cold or something. So please bear with us today. We're going to bring it to you the best we can because we are talking all things the SEC Football Conference this episode of the W Sports Podcast.
Conference like normal, but we're verging on maybe deeper than we've seen in a while.
Yes, and also very wide open. I think wide open in the sense that
Yes.
obviously there's quite
Yeah.
a bit of quarterback turnover, just natural turnover. But at the other
Yes.
side of it is there are teams that don't have turnover, quarterback turnover, but they still have like a really good team, which is
Hmm.
crazy. So, or they
Yep.
don't have as good of a team as some of the other ones. So it's going to be great to see. So, what are your initial thoughts outside of the team? Do you want to start on the bottom half of the teams? Who do you expect to win it? What do you want to start today?
Teams that might surprise some people this year. And I know I'm looking at Florida right now. I'm not. We're not the biggest Billy Napier fans. We don't think he's that great of a coach. But if DJ Lagway stays healthy and that defense performs like it did at the end of the season with losing minimal people on both sides, and then bringing in guys throughout, the transfer portal and stuff like that, this is a team that could really give some teams a headache because that Florida team, the last half of the season, I think's a good chance we see that for most of the season as long as Lagway is healthy. I mean, I think Lagway to me is one of the Heisman dark horses. The ability that he has, he was a freshman last year. This year he's got, another full year in the system, and he's a 6'3", 235-pound quarterback, but can move, and he's got the arm talent. He's needs to work a little bit on the accuracy, but I think this is a team that could really shock some people. They don't have the easiest schedule. That's going to be one of their big things. Their schedule is not easy, but if everything falls in line, I think this is the team that people are not going to want to play.
And so, speaking of schedule, I mean, they start with an FCS opponent in South Florida, and then they get at LSU, at Miami, against Texas, at Texas A&M, before they get a bit of a break with one of the bottom teams in the
Mhm.
SEC, with Mississippi State, before going to play Georgia, and then back-to-back games on the road again in the SEC. It is a gauntlet of a schedule. It feels a lot like Oklahoma's last year, or even Florida's last year was not an easy schedule. So
Yeah.
if they can survive this, absolutely, they could be a dark horse, but they have an uphill battle for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely not going to be an easy road, but honestly, I think that people are going to overlook the Texas Florida game based off of what we saw Florida most of the season last year. But I think this Florida team is much improved, and I still have quite a few questions about the Texas team because of all the replacements they're going to have to. I mean, you got 4 new starters on the offensive line. You've got 3 new starting wide receivers. You got a couple of your running backs missing. Then you flip to the defensive side. Yeah, you bring back Hill and you bring back Colin Simmons, who both had monster seasons. But now you're replacing Jade Barron in the secondary. You're replacing a majority of your defensive line. I I think that early on we might see some struggles, and that's not including seeing Arch Manning really get his first go of it. And so that game, I think people might overlook it just because of what we saw from Florida the first half of the season. But if we see the Florida from the second half of the season, and Lagway has improved leaps and bounds, like I think he will, might be an upset of brewing.
On the ball well, and they had 3 guys that they rotated in and out, in and out, in and out. They're going to have to find an identity with a physical ground game for them. But let's go ahead and transition to Texas. If you look at Texas, a lot of people expected them to win it all last year. You have the namesake of Manning. leading this team, but you're not a believer. But I think the general consensus is this is the team that should win the SEC this year. But you tell me why we should um, doubt some of these things.
That you are replacing and high profile players. It's not like you just some couple second string guys. You're like you said, you're replacing all your offensive line except for your right guard. You're replacing first round wide receiver Matthew Golden. You're replacing Isaiah Bond, Jaden Blue, who is a big piece of that offense. Also, your starting quarterback, and then you flip side, you're replacing ends, defensive tackles, your best secondary player. If I said Texas goes into the OU game, the Red River game, 3-2, would that be absurd? Columbus, it's not in Austin, and then you're going to Florida also. You're going to the swamp. So I think that, I mean, we're talking about a team that everyone is looking at potentially the best team in college football, should be, SEC champion, potentially, national champion, going into the Red River game. And if they lose that, potentially being 3-3 to start the season through the first 6 weeks of the season. And I mean, I think that it's a realistic possibility just due to the sheer amount of players that you are having to turn over. Yeah, you brought guys in the transfer portal. I understand that. And, high profile guys, you recruit really well. But are those recruits ready right off the bat? That's a big thing too. And has your team, melded together? Have they, came together, have that continuity? And I think that is one.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, well, and you look at the team, the schedule. This is one of those that this year, outside of the games that you mentioned, including Oklahoma, you still have Georgia and Texas A&M, and that's just a rivalry game. So you never know what's going to happen on those. This is
Mhm.
a team that has a tough schedule. All the non-conference is absolute trash, but like the
Yeah,
actual conference schedule, because they're now in the SEC, it's going to be an uphill battle for them too. Now, I am going to lean on I trust Arch Manning. I trust the pedigree. I trust Sark's ability to set him up to win and their ability to run the ball effectively, assuming they can stay out of the injuries, which they haven't been recently on the running back side of things. But I still believe in them. I think you're not wrong. I think this is a team that they have to watch out for getting two quick losses early in the season. But if they can go 1-1 of those two games, they still set themselves up pretty well. And if you're going to lose one of those, lose the one in Ohio State because it's non-conference.
the ball effectively. You're replacing pretty much your entire starting offensive line.
That's a great
So
point. Yep.
how effective are you going to be able to run the football? Yeah, like I said, you brought in transfers to replace those guys, but a lot of times we see these transfers and they're coming from low level talent, divisions, conferences and stuff like that, and it takes them a while to get adjusted to the physicality of an SEC football or a Big Ten football compared to playing in the Mountain West or the American Conference. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Well, okay, so we'll move on from Texas here. We need to go to the teams that have been the dominating teams over the past couple of years. We got LSU, Georgia, and Alabama. These are three teams. Alabama is one of them who finished last year ranked 17, which is wild to me after that loss. But they obviously have Ty Simpson or someone else to play quarterback. You have Georgia, who has a new quarterback, and you have Garrett Nussmeier coming back for LSU, who last year went 9-4 and somehow finished the season unranked. You order these. Who finishes higher at the end of the year?
I do. Facing a guy in Jalen Miller who was a decent player. Wasn't great. I think it was wildly overhyped. And you're replacing you're replacing some offensive line, which I don't know if that really matters because your offensive line was not great. But you don't have much of a run game like you typically lean on when it comes to this program. And now you are trying to figure out who is that quarterback. You've got three guys essentially in the running with Ty Simpson, Austin Mack, who came with DeBoer from Washington, and then you got the five-star Keelan Russell, who I think is thrown into that mix also. I think that people are giving them the benefit of the doubt based off the name alone, and I don't think we can do that because we saw them get beat 24-3 in Norman against a bad Oklahoma team, and then turn around in the bowl game and just get absolutely dominated by a Michigan team who had no offense whatsoever. Two teams that yeah, exactly. You lost to two teams that had no sense of offense whatsoever all season, and you got absolutely dominated in both of those. And then we're not talking about the losses, the loss on the defensive side of the players that you lost in Jahad Campbell and, a couple of these other defensive linemen and, Malachi Moore in the secondary. I'm very worried that there's a good chance that Kalen DeBoer may have a 2-year career at Alabama and get fired after the season because there's, I think, a realistic chance we see them go, 7-5, 8-4 again. And we know Alabama, that's not the way to do it. And I think that they're in for another long season because they have no answer at quarterback or with the run game. Yeah, you have Ryan Williams, who's one of the best, freshman wide receivers we've seen in a while. But other than that, there's not a whole lot of offensive, firepower on this offense for a team that should be able to recruit and get just about anybody you want. Or your starting offensive lineman, which is a tough thing to do. But then you take a look at like the other position players. You get a guy like Zachariah Branch from USC, who's one of the most explosive players in college football. You get Noah Thomas, a big time wide receiver transfer from Texas A&M. I think that this team could at least has more explosive plays, but there's still the big question of is Gunnar Stockton the guy? And I'm not quite sure. He brings a different element to the offense than Carson Beck did with his legs. He is a very mobile. He's not doesn't have a super strong arm, not incredibly accurate, but he at least gives you a different element than what you've had over the last few years that hasn't quite worked with Carson Beck. Hmm.
I've seen some where they also still have Arch Manning, so we're going to see how that goes. What is your expectation of this team? From in my eyes, when I look at them, they are actually the team to beat in this conference. This should be their year. to go after.
To college football right now. And yeah, and we're gonna get to see it right off the bat. But you bring back two of the best quarterbacks. You bring back one of the best quarterbacks in college football, Garrett Nussmeier. Then you throw in a guy like Barry Brown, who transfers from Kentucky, who is just an absolute lightning rod on the field, incredibly fast. And you have a couple other guys that are still there, and Aaron Anderson and Chris Hilton. And then you bring in OU transfer Nick Anderson if he can stay on the field. And Kate Durham, Caden Durham really showed a different element than what we've seen in the run game for LSU over the last couple of years, that explosiveness. And I think the defense is going to be vastly improved than what we've seen over the last few years. And I think this team is very dangerous and should be looked at as one of the top teams for the national championship. And I agree. I think that they should be the front runners for the SEC championship right now. Non-conference, yeah. hmm
In a second. They get at Alabama and at Vandy. We've already talked about Alabama and their struggles, but then they get at Oklahoma. So if you look at this, we're on the same page. We think it's their conference to lose, essentially. Let's go to some of that middle ground, some of the teams that have some hype, some expectations. Again, this is such a deep conference. We appreciate you guys sticking with us. We're at minute number 17 so far. So if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button, maybe hit the thumbs up, whatever works for you. Really appreciate the support on the channel. And we're excited about college football just as much as you guys are. So we just saw a couple more people hit the thumbs up. Thank you. All right, so let us get to it. We got this clump in the middle. We got South Carolina, Texas A&M, Mizzou, and Ole Miss. I want to go through those specific teams. What stand out about this group?
What he did last year as a first-year starter, now transitioning to second year as a full-time starter, got some dynamic weapons. Nick Harbor, who is an athletic freak. I mean, 6'6", can run a 10-10 100-meter dash. Big, tall, rangy. Then you look at the defensive side, and Dylan Stewart is an absolute monster. Was a true freshman last year and just put up incredible numbers. I think that this team, depending on how well those offensive players really, offensive line, and we talked about some of the dynamic guys. Yeah, how well they are able to take that. Can they take that step forward and make this offense even more dynamic? And can they be able to replace a couple of big name guys on the defensive side, and Kyle Kennard, and one of my favorite players from last year, Nick Inman Ward, will be the big question. But they seem to do a really good job at recruiting guys that a lot of people don't see, and they are able to develop them. And so I think they are another team that I think some people should be worried about, because no one saw them having the success they had last year with Lenore Sellers, putting up the numbers he did. And I think he's just going to get better.
And now we're going to see, can it continue to sustain this year? Is Austin Simmons, I believe, is who's expected to be it. So if you look at him, obviously we talked about, and I also, for the record, love Marcel Reed. He's the guy I would want, even if you said if Tubby's going to go ahead and take Lenore Sellers, Jimmy T's going to go ahead and say dibs on Marcel Reed. I love the talent. The problem is I don't love Texas A&M the same way. Texas A&M is going to be 8-win team, 9-win team. That's what I got here. And I think that that's the floor for South Carolina. Now the ceiling is higher, like what you said. They can go ahead and get things rolling together. But Ole Miss is this wild card team. So what's the expectation for a team that did just come off 10 wins and barely missed the playoff?
go all in on the transfer portal and try to get as many guys as they can. We saw it last year, especially on the defensive side, the amount of players that they were able to bring in. Austin Simmons is an interesting, you know, guy. I mean, because if I'm not mistaken, he's only 19 right now, and he's a redshirt sophomore. He graduated high school at 16, got 2 degrees at the age of 18, graduated college with 2 degrees at the age of 18. He's like some brainiac, but you watch him play and he throws a very pretty ball. He is a left-hander, so that could be a little different. We know lefties are different. When the ball comes off the hand, and a lot of these wide receivers aren't too used to it. But if things fall in place, I mean, Austin Simmons can do what Lane Kiffin's been able to do just about anywhere he's gone, is produce quarterbacks. This could be another team. Like I said, this conference is so deep that there's so many teams, and I think, like you said, it's so wide open that it's really hard to just lock down and go, okay, yeah. Usually we have Georgia, and we're like, Georgia's locked. They're one of the teams that you'll see in Atlanta who's the second team, and it's usually Alabama or someone one of those few teams. But this year, it's, I think, a lot more difficult to do that because there's so many teams that are replacing quarterbacks, and then the transfer portal, comes into question too, because you've got so many big name programs in this conference that they're all able to get big time transfers. And so it really is just going to come down to the coaching, who is able to get their guys on the same page faster than the other teams. And Lane Kiffin has, I think, out of all the coaches, may not be the best, and the brightest coach, but he does a great job at getting his team to come together through the transfer portal, and we've seen it the last couple of years. And if I was going to bet on one of these teams to be able to do that, very quick, it would be him, because we've seen it. But then it comes down to, can you win those big games, and can you not shoot yourself in the foot like you did last year and go and lose to a Florida team at the end of the season, and after you come off a big win over Georgia. Is we always see that happen with the Lane Kiffin Ole Miss team. They get right there, they're knocking on the door, and then never mind, I'm going to turn around and walk back down the sidewalk. So it's an interesting game. Can they finally get over that hurdle and put themselves in the conference championship game and potentially an automatic bid into the playoffs?
Outside of the Florida game and a rivalry game for what you would say with back against Mississippi State, but right there in the middle, they have about a 5.5 week period where it's going to be a little bit tough to navigate. So they get the runway to get all the offensive things smoothed and ironed out, and then they really hit the ground running. So really keep an eye on Ole Miss as you get to the middle of the college football season. Is what we would say. I would recommend. I think Tubby would too. So how about this? We got Mizzou, who I think we could both agree Mizzou is the Iowa of the SEC. Right, 8 wins last year. I think they had 10 this year, taking a step back. Then I think they may have one of the worst quarterbacks outside of Jackson Olive right now, until proven otherwise, in the conference.
Some flashes of a good player, but just not enough track record to really look at him and go, yeah, that guy, he can really, sling the ball. And they are replacing quite a few players on this team also, especially along the offensive line. So, yeah, I think for the most part, I would put them down towards the bottom until they prove me, wrong. Just because there's a lot of questions within this program, can they be answered, fast enough to really give us an idea of who they really are. Mm-hmm. Oklahoma and supposed to be this, the next Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, Jalen Hurts type guy. Maybe all that's off his shoulders and he can just go out there and play free. But until he can show me that he can be consistent and be a good player, I think we're looking at a lot of the same where it's just going to be another mediocre season for Auburn. No, I like Taylor Green. I think he's another underrated guy, but I just don't think there's enough around him to really offensive side, defense side. I don't think there's enough around him to really prop them up. And this would probably be the end of Sam Pittman at Arkansas.
That just 1 year makes, right? The difference that 1 year makes. How can you see Tennessee, who has the disaster of a transfer portal season that they have, and Oklahoma, who is grasping for any bout of air that they can as they're drowning, it seems like, in the SEC? What is the best advice for this season you have for both these teams?
Give you much. It's more along good luck because what transpired and what sounds like transpired even before the playoff game, you have a massive situation going on here when it comes to the NIL for this program. When you had multiple of your starters, big name players, threatening to sit out of a playoff game until you paid them more because they're playing extra games and this and that, that's when you have a problem within when it comes to culture, which I hate because Josh Heupel, former OU guy, we want to see him succeed, but you have a big problem there. And I think that it really showed when it came to the playoff game how flat they came out against Ohio State. Granted, Ohio State won the national championship. I think we're looking at a team that is destined to be towards the bottom of the SEC this year because I have no faith in Joey Aguilar as the starting quarterback in the SEC. Yeah.
They're gonna, and this is what you have to fix the NIL. It's too much like the Wild West. It's not fun. It's not fun for programs. It's not fun as a fan watching it. I'm sure it's kind of fun for a little bit for the athletes or the agents or whoever it is that's making money, but it is not fun for the rest of them. And eventually, something's gonna have to figure it out to bring it. So we are homers. So we didn't wait and we buried Oklahoma until the end of it. So if you made it this far, the Boomer Sooner, thanks again for hanging out with us, Tubby. This, I'm going to be honest with you, this is a dark horse team for me, and this because of the quarterback play. You look at Oklahoma 6-7 the first time they had Dylan Gabriel come in. The second year, much better. The defense is still preventable, so defensively, I trust at least the overall scheme. Now, the details, that's what's going to get this team in the butt. If they can't get the details ironed out, the penalties, the turnovers, it doesn't matter how good the quarterback play is. But that's where I like what they brought in the offseason, and they have one of the best quarterbacks, at least so far, going into the season.
Teams that usually let me down, but no, and the few times I did, it didn't work out. So I try to stay away from that. But I agree. I think this is a team. If things can come together, they have all the talent on both sides to really be a contender in the SEC. It's going to come down to Brent Venables stepping aside and letting Ben Arbuckle run his offense. Push it. I don't care about the position coaches. I don't care what DeMarco Murray says about the running backs and the in and out, all this, all that. Let Ben Arbuckle take over and be the main voice. The running back coaches, the position coaches they're there to build up the players. They're not there to be the ones that are telling which players to go in and out for formations and stuff like that. Stop it. We've seen it. It doesn't work the last couple of years. Let Arbuckle go out there and do what he did last year with John Mateer and lead this offense. The offensive line, is going to need to really step up. They got a few transfers, but I think we saw a couple glimpses of some decent young players last year. Logan Howland, at left tackle, he after his first start when Sexton got hurt, it was a little shaky. But after that, we've seen him grow and grow and become more consistent on the left side. So maybe a full off season, him being the guy, he can turn things around. And the health is going to be one of the biggest. Monster. You got Dominic Williams back another year. Then you got David Stone, coming in second full season. We saw Jaden Jackson, who was one of the best, freshman defensive linemen last year on this team. PJ Adebore, another full season of, he was a very raw player. Can that translate onto the field this year? I think this defensive line is scary good, and teams are going to struggle against them. And even losing Danny Stutzman, I think the linebacking crew is still one of the best. Kip Lewis, Kobe McKenzie are two exceptional middle linebackers. I don't worry about the defense. I worry about the offensive line and the injuries on the offensive side. But if things go right, this is a team that definitely could be a contender in the SEC and potentially a playoff spot. Yeah. I mean, yes. Mm-hmm. And we didn't even talk about the running back room. The running back room is incredibly deep, which is crazy to say. Yeah, you bring in a transfer in Jaden Ott, who when he was healthy 2 years ago, was one of the best running backs in college football. And then on top of that, you bring back Baxter, you bring back Robinson, you bring back Tatum, you bring back all these incredible guys that have shown glimpses, but it was so much of just flipping guys in and out that they weren't able to get that consistent run to get going. Yes. Yeah, and that. Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm.
To rhythm and wear people down. So, yeah, I'm glad we buried at the end because people are going to call us homers. So if you're in the chat, you can definitely say that we're homers. I'm sorry. If you look at the X's and O's, then yes, Oklahoma last year, no chance. But this year, it looks like they're much better. And their schedule, yes, it looks like it's a tough one, but we've seen tougher ones based off what's happened in the offseason.
In the SEC. You started off the season, week 2, week 3 with Michigan. Michigan's in a big, turnaround. What do they have going for them? Maybe a true freshman quarterback. Yeah. New running backs, new offensive weapons, new offensive linemen, new defensive players. And then, we talked about Ole Miss. What happens there? With Austin Simmons and them. LSU has to come to Oklahoma. Oklahoma does have to go to South Carolina, but then you look at Alabama. Alabama's going through a lot of transition. Same thing with Missouri. Missouri has to come to Oklahoma. Auburn has to come to Oklahoma. There's a lot working right for them on their schedule this year at the right time with what could potentially be a good year for Oklahoma and Brent Venables and maybe get him off that hot seat. Yeah. Yeah.
2 times a week. We will have another one next week. And we're almost to the trade deadline in baseball. So we will have an episode that's baseball. If you've missed baseball, don't worry, it's going to come back. And then we're going to begin to break down some of the NFL divisions, the conferences, things like that as we go into the month of August. And right before week 0 kicks off, we're going to have a full breakdown, probably like a super episode kind of like today, where we do predictions and all that kind of stuff for college football. And we'll obviously have one for football at the beginning of September, and the NFL, excuse me. So lots of reasons, Tubby, to subscribe to the show, right? That's true. That's true. So as always, we appreciate y'all hanging out with us. If we missed your team or we missed a thought about your team, put it in the chat. We'll get back to you. We'll make sure we respond the best we can. But until then, we'll see y'all next time. See you.